Welcome to another episode of Becoming a Techno Wizard. I don't even know. I don't remember if I had that sort of intro. Been doing it too much for my podcast, but anyways, part two of what I'm learning from design of everyday things. And this episode, I want to combine it with some things I was learning and thinking about augmented reality and virtual reality and just designing for immersive experiences. All right, because just a number of things that's been really, really interesting that I've been learning about design. So, um, okay, where to start? Where to start? uh, first to prime it a little bit. All right, before I get into the design of everyday things thing. I've been had a nice little meeting with my team, former team now. Left the arcade, so I can focus more on learning design and finding a career in this space. But on my I guess going away party. We had some great conversations, man. I missed that. We haven't really had a chance to do that much since the pandemic, but um, so we talked about what the future of XR will look like. Augmented reality and virtual reality. I'm not going to go into all that right now, but I would love to maybe a little bit later. Um, but one thing that was brought up by one of my team, the co-founders of the company, he is a HCI, well, in that space of human computer interfaces. He's getting his doctorate at Georgia Tech for a very specific thing, for audio and something I don't remember, but he has a lot of research knowledge on that. And he was talking about how one thing you have to is one of the biggest problems with current day virtual reality and augmented reality is the haptics problem, right? And that's a bigger problem than just being able to feel things. It's a problem of design in general. So, and this is something I'm learning from the book of the design of everyday things. Even more is that for design you want affordability, right? And you want I guess you can call it natural mapping, right? Be able to map the control action of what you do to the action to the event that happens, right? So if you, for instance, in a car, you have all these buttons, right? These are famous for being most cars are famously like have bad design in terms of the buttons because there's all these buttons that you have to press, but you don't really know which one what does what unless you see the label. And what Don Norman says here is that if you need a label, it's probably a sign of a bad design, or at least some fault in the design. And of course, you can't make everything perfect. Like there's going to be more times than not, you're going to have to design something where you need a label, just because it was maybe too expensive or too much work or too much whatever or limited space or the constraints, whatever. It could be any number of things that make it hard for you to make a perfect natural mapping between the action and the or between the control and the action. But nonetheless, this problem is really exacerbated with immersive experiences. In AR, if you have a image coming at you in your eye, projected into your face, and so in the world you see like some, for instance, if you make it super simple, if you see a screen in front of you, right? How do you interact with that screen, right? On your phone or on your computer, whatever. It's super. I'm not gonna say simple, but it's kind of natural, right? Or well, we created that natural mapping. But the point is that when you see a screen, there's stuff going on here, so you scroll, right? There's only so many ways you can use a smartphone, a touchscreen smartphone, right? So if you see a screen out here, there's no way to use it unless you touch it. um, for your computer, you have a keyboard and a mouse, right? They created these interfaces, these graphic user interfaces, in order for you to use the keyboard or the mouse to interact with what is on the screen, right? These aren't touch screen on your computer. You can't just reach out into it and make things happen, right? You can't translate your thoughts directly to the machine. You have to use the keyboard to type something. You have to use a mouse to click something and stuff like that, right? It seems natural, right? It seems, kind of a no-brainer to say that, but oops, sorry, my music was playing. But the point is that these were designed, right? Somebody created these interfaces so that people humans can interface with a computer, human computer interface. And but that design is, goes beyond just computers. It goes for literally anything. When you're using, headphones, you put them on your head and you hear the music come out, right? There's only so many ways for you to use this device here. You can maybe try to put it on your chest or something. That's not going to do anything for you. And that's a part of the design, is that the constraints of the physical constraints of the tool limits what you can do with it. And so it makes it easier to figure out how to use that tool. That's all design. A great example he gave here was for stove tops. You may have seen this in that you have a four range stove or something like that, right? And if you want to turn on the burner, if you want to turn on any things, you have four control modules for them. So bad design is having them all in a line, just one, two, three, four, and then you have four burners, in a rectangle, something like that. How do you decide which knob goes to which burner? Without labels. If there are no labels on there, how would you decide? You have to guess. And he was saying, because of because of these choices, there's 24 options, 24 options, that you would have to go through to decide which one goes which. I mean, maybe when you actually start doing it, you can figure it out, of course, so it won't actually be 24. But the point is that there are a lot of things that you have to think about in order to figure this out. Now, most stoves, at least, they have they're split into two. So that these two knobs on the left, it's only for the left burners. These two on the right is only for the right burners. So now your options are down to four, right? So there's less things you have to worry about, less thinking that you have to do. But the best designs are ones where the knobs reflect the design of the burners. So for instance, if you have, two in the back and two in the front, maybe you have knobs. It's like, it could be somewhere in a line. It could even be in a line like that, right? So long as like the burners are like spread apart a little bit. So it's one, two, three, four. They're kind of in a line themselves. And, the knobs are in the line one, two, three, four. So it's kind of simple to say, oh, it's probably like that, right? So even if you guess it and there's no labels, you can pretty accurately guess what to do. Um, and what I was getting to is that in augmented reality, when you have these interfaces going on in front of you, how do you figure out how to use it? Right? There's so many choices, right? You can reach out. I don't know. Do you reach out your hand and gesture? Do you talk? Do you try to move your head or something around? And just the function of using your hand is in itself can bring up dozens, if not hundreds, of options, right? That's why a lot of the like the HoloLens is pretty cool, but it's still dedicated for enterprise. It cannot be a consumer headset, not only because of the expense, but simply because of the design itself. The design limitations of that tool is really cool and is really useful, but it's only really accessible. It's only really useful for people in enterprise situations where they can teach their employers or their company to use certain functions. So for instance, in the HoloLens, you know, in order for you to make an option, there's different gestures for you to do. So if you want to, select something, you have to like do like a little pointer thing, right? In order for you to, or you do like a pinching option. So it seems simple once you learn it, but the fact is you have to learn it. So somebody has to teach you how to do it, and you might forget. Sometimes you're like, what does this do? Is this to bring it towards you, to push it away, to expand it, to shrink it and stuff like that. So how are you to 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 know what the controls are for augmented reality or for any of these emergent technologies? This is a huge thing. I'm 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 um, I'm getting on too, because for me, I've been looking for jobs and emerging technology because that's what I'm super interested in, right? In building the future. But a lot of these companies don't have designers, and yet they have advanced technology, right? This technology that's so useful and has so many features and has so many amazing things it can do, but they don't really have many people on their team thinking about how the user is going to use it, right? Um, I'm not going to get into that either, but just suffice to say, this is something that we should be thinking about, especially as designers, um, because we need to realize that what the value of design is. right? Especially for emergent technology. So, you know, further in the book, he talks about um, there's knowledge in your, there's only three ways to remember things. Okay. There's arbitrary knowledge. So like the alphabet, you just memorize the alphabet. It's basically rote knowledge, right? When somebody teaches you to do something by just, and you just memorize it, because it's kind of arbitrary. There's no reason for you to memorize it a certain way, or people just taught you that way. You memorize it. So the alphabet, you know, somebody came up with it, and it goes A B C D blah 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 blah, right? There's no actual reason why it has to be like that, but that's how we memorized it, and so that's how it's taught. But of course, we sing it. You know, we sing. Usually, they teach you by singing it, A B C D, you know, to the Twinkle Twinkle Little Stars song, and the reason why is because it's easier to remember arbitrary things when you put it in the system, which is the second way of remembering things, forming a relationship between things. So the most common way for, I'm not going to say the most common way, but one of the most, you know, important ways for us to know something is to realize what this, how everything comes together, right? Or rather the relations to it. And this is called mental models. And mental models is essentially, you know, what is your idea of how something works? And that mental model allows you to decide to figure out um, how to fix problems, right? How to, if you come up against a new thing that you never seen before, if you've seen something similar to it, you can probably guess, you know, how this works. That's how troubleshooting works. That's how, you know, solving just, you know, difficult problems works. Anything that's really outside of muscle memory, of reaction, is probably going to be some sort of mental model. And then lastly, there is understanding. So that is being able to explain how something works. So you might be able to have an understanding of, hey, you know, that looks like that. And so these are probably related, you know, like the colors of the rainbow or something like that. Um, if you have a mental model of how colors work, you can probably guess, you know, how to match different colors. But you may not have a understanding of how to explain it, right? How to say, hey, maybe it's a certain way the hue and saturation plays off of each other, or you know what makes this color pair with this in this environment with this sort of lighting and all this other stuff. Understanding something allows you to explain it to yourself and to others, and so that you can, you know, repeat it, you can teach it, and all this other stuff. But it takes a lot longer, right? And it's much more difficult to get to that point. So these three ways of knowledge are very, very pretty much basic. These are things we've been using for a long time. And the problem, though, is that the modern day century has put way too much onus on just the first way of knowledge of knowing things by rote memorization. Like in school, we learn most of the things in school by just memorizing facts, memorizing math, memorizing words, memorizing all this stuff, right? And it's the worst way of memory of remembering things, because the human mind can only keep up like, I think he says five things, give or take, like two. So most people can only remember between 3 and 9 things, or 3 and 7 things. And and so, you know, when you try to do rote memorization, oftentimes we remember we remember it in sets and chunks. So we have to remember this part first, and then this part, and then this part, and then those chunks are come together, and that's how we do things. And even that is a more advanced way of knowing than most people are even taught, or consciously taught, right? They might teach them, you know, that's kind of how school is broken down in terms of learning math, or, you know, vocabulary words. Is we do a simple thing first, and then we build on top of it, and then we build on top of it. It's the same idea. It's just chunking, right? And that's because we can only remember a small amount of things at a time. um Sorry, there's a chipmunk up there. But yeah, and this is bad, because when we're designing things, you know, we can't expect people to just memorize all the, like the directions or the instructions, or you know, the, the operations manual. That's just ridiculous, right? And so you need to design something in a way where the knowledge, and he says this, you know, further on, I believe I talked about in the last episode. The knowledge is a combination of in the world and in your head. So to recap what I said from the last episode, the beginning of this chapter 3 of Design of Everyday Things, knowledge is either in your head or in the world, or some combination of both. Basically, in your head is things that you remember, um, and in the world is it's just outside stuff. Is labels, is um, any number of things. But later in this chapter, he goes on and says, when you're remembering things, you can use either knowledge in the head or knowledge in the world. So, for instance, if you want to remember a date, how do you remember a date? If it's important to you, you can keep it in your head, like your birthday or something like that, right? You don't have to write down your birthday to remember it. It's very important to you, to most of us at least. And so remember, it's just something that we can do through rote memorization, because every year we have the same birthday, maybe multiple times a year. We're thinking about that birthday. Other people are talking about that birthday. It just gets stuck in there. But most things most dates we're not gonna remember. If I say, remember this date, March 22nd, 1885, right? You might remember it now because I just told you, but come back to this, or think about this episode in 3 days and see if you still remember that date. It's just an arbitrary date, right? Unless you replay this, video back a ton of times, you're probably not going to remember that date. It has nothing to do with you. There's no reason why you need to remember that. I don't remember that. I don't remember what date I just said, but a lot of times we're given these tasks of remembering things. Like he says it in the book. He says, we got zip codes, phone numbers, passwords, ages, dates, addresses, all this stuff in the modern day age where we have to remember. But most of it is just arbitrary. And so the second way of remembering things is in the world. So we create ways for you to remember. If I say remember March 22nd, well, I say 1885 or whatever, right? You can put it on a sticky note. Put that sticky note on your laptop or whatever. Now you can remember. Every time you look at that date, you remember. There's other ways to remember too. He says there is a difference between the signal and the message. So this can be said for both ways of remembering, but basically, when you set a reminder for something, there is the initial signal that says, "Hey, remember something," right? It's telling you there's something that you need to remember here. But you also have to remember the message. So, for instance, if I told you, you know, um, I should just use one of his examples. I should have wrote notes. I write notes for Atomic Habits when I do it on Instagram, but I like these to be just more free flowing. So, but whatever. I just come up with my own example. So, I remember. Okay, so he says, there's this date. Your neighbor says, "I need you to drop me off the airport. Next week at 3:30." Right? You might set a reminder. It says, airport. Right? That might be your memory. But if it's just on a sticky note, it says airport. You get a signal, and you get half of them. You get a little bit of the message, but you don't really get the full message. Like, what does airport mean? Like, are you going to remember the exact date you're supposed to drop them off? Who you're supposed to drop off? What time? That's why it's important to design something that gives you both the signal and the message. Another example. Um, they had this method. I remember because I used to try this different ways of remembering things. So they had this method of, you put uh, like a red string around your finger, or a band around your wrist or something like that, right? And every time you look at that, you're supposed to remember the thing that you were forgetting a lot. Like, for instance, if you forget to, I'm gonna do something simple. If you forget to turn off the bathroom light, right? Maybe you put a finger on your string on your finger. Every time you look at it, you're supposed to remember turn off the bathroom light. But if you forget, it could be like a week later or something like that, and you have a string on your finger, like, what was I supposed to remember? So you got that signal. You remember that string is on your finger because you're supposed to remember something, but you don't get the message, and so you're confused again. And so it's important, once again, to design things that communicate both the signal and the message of what you're supposed to be doing here. So, anyways, so all of that got me thinking a lot about augmented reality and virtual reality, because a lot of this is going to be coming pretty soon, right? um, Apple's trying to develop this whole augmented reality Apple glasses that's going to help augmented reality be more mainstream. But we have a ton of these other you know um, companies creating augmented reality, and of course you have virtual reality and everything like that. But the haptics problem is a huge problem because if we can't make it obvious to people how to use these certain interfaces in this virtual world, then it's going to be incredibly difficult for people to learn, how to use these tools to the best of their advantage, and thus is going to be seen as too difficult for them. It's going to be seen as maybe even a fad, something like that, because people are going to be like, oh, this is too hard for me to learn, or this is dumb, or whatever. Either, like I said way early on, what Don Norman said, people either blame themselves or the device, right? They say either the system is dumb or they themselves are dumb. And for a lot of times in technology, people blame themselves because they think it should be simple. Somebody created this, they give you a manual and stuff like that, and you still don't understand it. So people will blame themselves. But usually it's the design problem. And so for me, to circle back on what I was talking about in the beginning of this video, when my coworker, the co-founder, was talking about augmented reality and the problem with that, I mentioned that this problem might be solvable, through haptic devices. So I know Apple has put a patents out for something like a finger tracking or you know, wristband or something like that. And I was wondering maybe that is going to provide a haptic, experience, so that um, when you point at something, you can you has like a little, maybe some like sound vibrations, and it can give some of that feedback. Or if you have like a calendar on the wall, right? How do you interact with that virtually? On your phone, you just swipe it. So in the real world, we probably imagine that you physically move the page like you do in the calendar in like real life. But if you have no haptic feedback, then it's easier to forget that gestures, or it's easy to just make mistakes. Maybe you grab it at the wrong area, or any of these other problems. So a haptic device can, like, vibrate or something, give you that feedback when you interact with it. So that's one option to have. But honestly, I think this is going to be a difficult problem. But it is one I'm excited to figure out. Because augmented reality allows us, and virtual reality allows us to truly empower ourselves beyond what we've been able to do so far. And it's so important to think about these problems, because I feel like a lot of these technologies that we have today are just, they weren't made by enough designers to be honest with you, or at least they weren't as user centered as they should have been, right? Maybe you don't need a whole team of UX designers, even though I still think you do. Not just because I just spent 10 months learning it, but because there's just so much you have to think about, and somebody that's not dedicated to it is just highly unlikely that they're going to be able to think about all these problems. But a lot of these amazing technologies are made by really smart engineers who are focused on how to make it work, right? On how it works, on the code, on so much, the engineering, whatever, even cells and all that stuff. But without a user-centered approach, then you're going to come up, like, for instance, with a quantum computer, right? If you want people to use this quantum computer to, you know, I don't know, make amazing simulations and games and all this stuff, or create medicines and all that, you're gonna need it to be accessible by the doctors that are using it for medical purposes, or this, that, and the other. And we can't just expect that we're going to have to train up a class of technicians just to use this technology, because that limits the use of it. That limits the practicality of that technology. Just imagine if augmented reality comes out and you need to be, you need to have some level of technical know-how in order to use even the basic functions of it. Most people aren't going to use it. You know, Apple's going to sign it off as a failure or something like that, and then investors aren't going to be investing in it as much, and growth would drop down, and innovation would drop down. And so this technology that can really change the world for the better is going to be pushed away by decades, just because they designed it without without a user-centered approach. Maybe it's not that dramatic, but I think it is. I think it is. You know, the way we use our technology, um, or the way we think about our technology, goes a long way in how we're going to use it and innovate on it. All right, but yeah, I think I might end it there. Sorry, this was more rambling than usual. I've been learning a lot recently and been just going through a lot of different, um, transformations and changes. So just getting a handle on everything right now. And but I do want to be more consistent with these videos and put more stuff out there. And I want to grow my channel more and have more of these have actual conversations. You know, that's my biggest thing, is that I want to, get to know more designers, whether it be students or experts. Get to know, you know, uh, leaders in these technical companies, and just have conversations about this stuff, because that's one thing I don't really see happening very often. You know, I've been putting my ear to the floor, to the ground or whatever, trying to figure out what's going on in the industry and UX and emerging technology and AR, VR, and all this stuff. And I just have not seen a whole lot of conversation about how to make our technology more user friendly. Um, and it seems like a simple conversation to have. Seems like a no brainer conversation to have, but I listen to dozens of podcasts. You know, Voices of VR, VR AR Association, um, what do you call it? Radical VR. It's not radical. No, the Real VR Show. That's way off. Like a ton of stuff, right? um, but there's just not a lot of people talking about this, and I think that's a oversight, because, like I said before, I say it again, say it a million times if I need to, but we need to have more user-centered, human-centered technology. If this technology is too difficult to use, if it doesn't make sense for people, then it's going to severely hamper our innovation. It's going to increase the technological divide we see between classes, between age groups, between, you know, cultures, really. And that's a huge problem, especially in today's world where we're becoming more and more and more globalized, but also more and more polarized, right? We can't be having that. If we want to unify together, if we want to come together and be able to, see each other's differences and stuff like that, we have to be able to communicate with each other. We have to be able to use each other's devices and understand each other's cultures and understand each other's mental models, right? And so the more conversations we can have about this, about anything else in the world, really, the better our world will be. The more united we will be, the more um, good things will happen. Quite frankly, let's keep it real simple. Um, but yeah, be on the lookout. I'm excited because I think I'm going to start a podcast about, interviewing these tech leaders and asking them about, the role of VR in their, or the role of UX in their team, in their company, and how they, the value of user-centered approach at their company. So if you'd be interested in that, let me know, because that's what I'm trying to see. I want to make sure this is actually something other people care about. Because if I'm the only one people, really caring about this, then I guess it doesn't really matter, huh? I mean, even if I'm the only one, I'm still gonna do it. But I would like to know if other people care too, because that way I can know if I should actually invest in making this a full podcast and putting it out there, or if I should just keep it to myself here on this channel and just do what I've been doing. Either way, I'm excited about it. I believe this is really important, and I'm just gonna keep learning and keep growing and keep sharing. So as always, let me know what you think. Let me know what you're thinking. Oh, that's for my podcast. I'm so sorry. Uh, thanks for watching. Get my lines all crossed. Thanks for watching and have a good day. Hope you learned something. Let me know in the comments. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. So thanks again. Bye bye. See ya.